So this is a pretty high-level discussion we're going to have. I'd like to focus on two of the many angles of Oslo. One is what went wrong, and the other is why does it, as Jonathan pointed out, continue? Why do we have a new version of Oslo just begun a couple of months ago under benign auspices of our India? So what went wrong? It's good to set the scene, to remember that when Palestinians were still under Israeli control in September of 1993, they had benefited from the rule of law and a growing economy, independent of international welfare. They enjoyed functioning schools and hospitals. They traveled without checkpoints and had free access to Israeli territory. They even founded several universities. Terrorism had declined. And then Oslo came, and it brought not peace and prosperity, but tyranny, failed institutions, poverty, corruption, a death cult, suicide factories, and Islamist radicalization. In other words, the Palestinians paid for this, not just the Israelis. And of course, the Israelis paid. More Israelis were killed by Palestinian terrorists in the 5 years after Oslo than in the 15 years preceding it. Israel's standing internationally, as you heard, was damaged, leading to questions about Israel's existence that were not alive at that time, especially on the left, which was not so anti-Israel 20 years ago, and spawning moral perversions such as the UN World Conference Against Racism that took place in Durban, South Africa. From Israel's perspective, the 7 years of Oslo diplomacy of 1993 to 2000 largely undid the 45 years of successes in warfare that preceded it. So what went wrong? What was a key kernel? Now, clearly on the Palestinian side there was violence, extremism, incitement, and so forth, but that's not the key. As you just heard, this was Israel's mistake. This was not made in Ramallah or Tunis at the time. This was not a Palestinian initiative, this was an Israeli initiative. So what did the Israelis do wrong? Now, I believe the great mistake lay in the assumption behind Oslo that can be summed up in a catchphrase that Yitzhak Rabin, the Prime Minister, often repeated. You may recall it. One does not make peace with one's friends, he used to say. One makes peace with one's enemy. Now, he expected that through goodwill and conciliation, mediation, flexibility, restraint, generosity, compromise, and topped off with those famous painful concessions, there would be signed documents that would lead to an end of conflict. But of course it did not. In fact, Israeli concessions inflamed Palestinian hostility because Palestinians interpreted Israeli efforts to, quote, make peace, unquote, as signals of demoralization and weakness. Painful concessions reduced Palestinian awe of Israel, made the Jewish state appear vulnerable, and incited irredentist dreams of annihilation. Each Oslo negotiated gesture by Israel further exhilarated, radicalized, and mobilized the Palestinian body politic to war. The quiet hope of 1993 to eliminate Israel gained traction, becoming a deafening roar by 2000. So what was the problem with this Rabin statement? The problem was simple and profound. One cannot, quote, make peace with one's enemy, as he imagined one could. Rather, one makes peace with one's former enemy. Peace nearly always requires one side of the conflict to be defeated. You don't make peace with enemies. If I am your enemy, you can't make peace with me because I'm after you. You first have to defeat me, and then we can talk terms. To put it crudely, no one was talking peace with Adolf Hitler in 1942. You can't make peace with an enemy. You make peace with somebody after you defeated them. This was the problem with Oslo. The key kernel of the problem was that the Israelis thought they could finesse winning. You didn't need to win. You didn't need to defeat your enemy. You just had to make concessions to him. That's called appeasement. And it works sometimes, ladies and gentlemen. Appeasement works. The British government appeased the United States in the 1860s on the contentious issue of the Yukon-Alaska border. And believe it or not, there's been no conflict there ever since. It worked. Britain and the United States and appeasement worked. They gave us something we wanted and left them alone. It didn't work in the 1930s with Hitler. It didn't work in the 1970s with Brezhnev, and it didn't work in the 1990s with Arafat. Notice the pattern. It doesn't work. You can't give a virulent ideologue something he wants and hope he'll go away. He'll take it, pocket it, and say, give me more. And that's in fact what happened. There needed to be defeat of the Palestinians before an agreement could be signed. And that remains the case today. The Palestinians today are not yet defeated, in the sense they still believe that they can eliminate the Jewish state of Israel. It's a live aspiration among Palestinians and many others as well. So long as that aspiration thrives, there can be no agreement. There is no finessing victory. The only way to win wars is by winning them, not by making painful compromises. My second question is, why is it still going on? Why is, in Ambassador Edgar's terminology, why are we focused on the tumbleweed rather than the central? Why, with Syria in flames, Egypt at the precipice, Iran in centrifuges whirring, and the like, why are we focused? Why is our Secretary of State going 6 times in 4 months to Ramallah and Jerusalem? What is motivating this? Well, I think there's an answer. And I'd like to read 3 statements to you by way of an answer. The first is from James Jones, who was National Security Advisor in 2009, which was addressing J Street. It's not a very coherent statement, but I think you get the gist of it. Of all the problems the administration faces globally, if there was one problem that I would recommend to the President, that if he could do anything he wanted to solve one problem, pursuing peace between Israel and her neighbors would be it. Got it? If I could recommend one solution, one aspiration for the President, it's solving the Arab-Israeli conflict, or the Israeli-Palestinian problem. Finding a solution to this problem has ripples that echo that would run globally and affect many other problems that we face elsewhere in the globe. The reverse is not true. That is the epicenter, Arab-Israeli is the epicenter, and this is where we should focus on efforts. So, gotta focus this because it has effect on not just the region, but the world. More to the point was Secretary of State John Kerry on September 8th, a few weeks ago, who referred to his talks with the Arab League. We, all of us, agreed that a final status agreement is important in enhancing regional security and stability throughout the Middle East. Finally, Barack Obama, General Assembly, September 24th, already alluded to. Real breakthroughs on 2 issues, Iran's nuclear program and Israeli-Palestinian peace, would have a profound and positive impact on the entire Middle East and Africa. So the point of these 3 quotes is that there is a widespread feeling among top members of the administration, Democrats more broadly, that if you can solve the Arab-Israeli problem, then the other issues in the Middle East, Iran, Syria, Egypt, whatever, will be more available to solution than otherwise. They're not crazy. They're not saying that everything results from the Arab-Israeli conflict. They're not ascribing everything to Israel, which used to be a belief. But this is a more sophisticated version, which, by the way, I attribute to Mark Indyk. I heard it from him when he was ambassador to Israel in, I think, 1996 or so. I remember arguing in his office in Tel Aviv over this, and he was adamant that this is the key, that you got to start here and the other things follow. I don't know if this is exactly his influence, but I heard it first from him and ascribed it to him. I think it's dead wrong. The Arab-Israeli conflict is peripheral to the causes of volatility, violence, extremism in the Middle East. It is not the source of it, it is the symptom of it. And if that wasn't clear 3 years ago, it sure should be clear now that there is violence all over, extremism and so forth. And very, very little reference to Israel. But that isn't what our esteemed political leadership is thinking. It is thinking Israeli electricity grids, checkpoints in the West Bank, and the like. This is what is the stumbling block to making progress in the Middle East. This must be addressed before anything else. Yes, they will tell you, Iranian centrifuges are a bigger problem than Israeli building housing in the West Bank. But if you want to address the centrifuges, you've got to start with this, the Israelis building. I think it's wrong, but I think it's important to understand that this is their thinking and it needs to be addressed, it needs to be argued with. Otherwise, the Arab-Israeli conflict will remain the central issue. Otherwise, Oslo